Hello, my name is Dr. Megan Higgins Gramling, and I am a contributing faculty member for the PPOTD department. I own my own practice as a nature-based OT here in Alabama, and for years, I think 13 total, I did classical ballet training. So I wanted to incorporate my love for OT and dance and trauma as a certified trauma professional into research that I am excited to share with you all today. So, trauma is a complex phenomenon and it's defined in a variety of different ways depending on the healthcare provider being asked. There are various forms of trauma, but most experts would agree that each trauma has certain components that create a broad definition of an emotional response to a disturbing event. One of the key components of trauma is that you feel helpless, you're unable to change the situation. So, trauma is a very subjective experience. What would be traumatic for me is not necessarily going to be something that you would consider traumatic, but it can occur in any setting to any person. How trauma is stored in the body, though, is less subjective. There's research out there now where most experts do understand that trauma doesn't just live in the brain. It's not just a mind issue, but it also lives in our very cells and affects our daily health and well being. Movement and expressive arts have also been known to connect the mind and body and have been used to promote health and are known to decrease signs and symptoms of anxiety, depression, body image, and mood imbalances. So, this presentation aims to show the link between the occupation of dance and its healing effects on trauma. Trauma has become quite a buzzword in healthcare lately, and it gives a broad encompassing of events that range from interpersonal verbal assaults to experiences akin to things more widely known as trauma, like war, natural disasters, or even rape. So, regardless of the event that triggers a traumatic response, though, humans are historically familiar with this phenomenon as it's been a part of our nervous system makeup since the dawn of civilization. Humans are wired in our hindbrain or our reptilian brain for fight or flight as a survival mechanism. And although we are no longer running away from saber-toothed tigers, this life-saving skill, is still something that we can call upon. Just as humans have forever had a relationship with traumatic experiences, animals of all kinds, including humans, have understood that movement is a powerful way to create healing. A common reaction to a post-traumatic event, as you can see in animals, is shaking. It's been used by Native American cultures, Africans, Taoists, and in Ayurvedic medicine for millennia. And it works by discharging excess energy from the adrenals through movement in the body. Only in the recent years has this ancient body informed healing modality resurfaced and been refined as a way to work with traumatized clients in more culturally appropriate manners like somatic experiencing in psychotherapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, brain spotting, as well as somatic based or body based exercises in polyvagal theory. Trauma, which I mentioned is non discriminatory, causes various health issues such as decreased cardiac output, impaired immune and nervous system responses, digestive and musculoskeletal disorders, and it increases the chance for addiction. So, with the physiological issues of disease come the ways in which humans cope. That looks like for trauma, addictions, disassociation, alienation from the body, negative body image or eating disorders, and all of these perpetuate further trauma. The subjective experience of trauma can be thought of in its basic definition as a boundary crossing, whether that be psychological, physical, or social. When this boundary crossing occurs, the effects are felt in the brain and the body. So, trauma is stored differently than long term or short term memory in that it's stored in the amygdala, which is part of the limbic system in our brain responsible for emotions. Kolk in 2014 found that trauma is also stored in the tissues as an activation of that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight system we have physiologically, and it produces adrenaline and cortisol to propel us into those life saving actions like running away from the saber toothed tiger. If a mammal doesn't act on that nervous system activation, then the hormones stay in the body and are until discharged through movement, most notably in the hips, as those are the part of our musculature that's used most in having to run away from threats. So many mammals, like I mentioned, discharge this through shaking after the event and when they feel like they're in a stable area of safety. However, most humans don't dispel this stress states, so therefore it's staying locked in our tissues. The amygdala is known to respond well to movement and exercise, and even more effectively in some studies than anti anxiety medications. There was a study by Lloyd in 2009 that noted how preferable people find mind body therapies and approaches like movement rather than pharmacological interventions that have multiple side effects a lot of the times. So, trauma as it's known today was only recently placed in the DSM as a mental health disorder. That can be misleading, like I mentioned, as it's not something that just lives in our brain and affects our mental state. Even more recently, polyvagal theory has expanded on that mind body connection of the sensory motor experience through our 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. So, polyvagal theory was developed by Stephen Porges, and it states that the body neurocepts danger externally from the environment while processing it through interoception, which is our internal monitoring system. Interoception is not a new term for OTs, as it directly correlates with our most basic of sensory needs, those of proprioception and vestibular. In working with the polyvagal theory, interoception is used to identify which state of being a person is currently in. It's most used with the image of a ladder, where at the bottom of the ladder you have dorsal vagal, which is a very immobilized state. Kind of middle of the ladder, you have sympathetic, which is that fight or flight. And then at the top of the ladder, you have ventral vagal, which is kind of connected and online to interact with your fellow humans. Alexithymia is the inability to interocept or verbalize one's emotional state. And it's a common issue with people who have had trauma. So, when you're working with people who have that, polyvagal theory incorporates somatic experiencing of both the mind and the body in the hopes to move a client from that dorsal vagal or sympathetic state into more ventral vagal, where the frontal lobe is activated and they're no longer in that primal state of immobilization and fear. There has been a lot of research in recent years focused on the effects of mindful moving on trauma, anxiety, and depression. Mindful movement can be thought of essentially as self-awareness through that orientation to the mind-body connection. Movement, music, and dance have been a part of the human experience since the dawn of civilization. Ancient ceremonies were marked with specific dances and music because humans have always had a connection to somatic experiencing or body-based movement. It's been reported that there are 6 basic emotions thought to be understood regardless of culture or language: happiness, fear, anger, sadness, disgust, and surprise. And not only are these emotions able to be identified in people, but through mirror neurons, these embodied emotions can be able to evoke that feeling in the viewer. So that's one way that people use movement therapy, is to use your mirror neurons and watch someone experiencing what it is you can't verbalize and be able to kind of incorporate it that way through the mirror neurons. Performing mindful movement through dance has been linked to numerous outcomes like decreased anxiety, decreased depression, improved mood and well-being. And dance therapy has been said to specifically have, and I'll quote from an article here, the capacity to assist people to regain mental balance as a result of a traumatic experience or series of experiences. So that was from an article in 2022. Dance therapy can be described as incorporating the occupation of dance to foster play, functional mobility, performance skills, or even as a leisure activity. Multiple research findings have linked the occupation of dance to enhanced performance skills. One study that was really neat worked with a group of Ukrainian refugees. They performed 12 dance classes via social media And the group that had the intervention of dance had a decrease of 44 points on Zung's self rating depression scale, compared with only an 18-point decrease in the control group. This same study said that dance is an intervention that can aid people in in recovering from traumatic experiences, which was the conclusion of this group of war refugees. There was another study done by OTs working with kids who had developmental and intellectual disabilities in 2023 that supported dance, improving mental, social, and physical skills. Occupational therapists Fleta, Carter, and Kotler in 2021 found the occupation of dance helped clients' processing speeds, attentional control, depression, and sleep in their patients who had Parkinson's. These clients were reported in feeling happier, more energetic, less anxious, and greater overall well-being at each dance class compared with when they started the class. These studies show how incorporating the occupation of dance sessions can improve cognitive functions, physical performance skills, emotional well-being, and then just general health and wellness. This research can be used to facilitate working with trauma clients by allowing the body to process emotions and sensations in ways that the rational frontal brain cannot. The article by Melzer in 2019 gave specific movements associated with each emotion that we talked about being able to recognize across cultures. And this could easily be used with dance therapists to elicit emotional states through movement. From an OT perspective, interventions similar to the aforementioned are highly connected with sensory processing theory, as this movement involves proprioception, interoceptive, and vestibular systems, which are the foundational grounding sensory systems of our body. Helping clients connect with the emotions held within the body and elicit these states are powerful in facilitating climbing that polyvagal ladder to a more ventral vagal state of connection and compassion. Being equipped with this knowledge as OTs is vitally important, as being able to see the specific movements the client is eliciting can also help identify which states they are in and be processed more effectively through a completely client-centered approach. Focusing client-centered interventions on reconnecting with the body is of utmost importance and have been shown to increase quality of life in all areas. Involving the body in treatment connects the internal sensations, both viscerally, interoception, and musculoskeletal with proprioception and kinesthesis, to resolve a dysfunctional state of automatic nervous system. Using the occupation of dance can elicit healthy emotions and our states of being. It can improve cognitive and physical performance skills and increase overall happiness and satisfaction with our activities of daily living. As trauma treatments slowly move away from the original view of post-traumatic stress disorder to a more body-centered approach, OTs have the potential to create a client-centered, occupation-based method to support clients dealing with trauma in a way that others cannot. Thank y'all for listening to this research.